In this video, we address some of the grammatical basics of Greek nouns, and we address second declension koine Greek nouns. As always, have your whiteboard handy. We're going to be doing some writing work together, and for the first time, we get to do some translation work together in these videos. So something for you to look forward to at the very end of the video. I know I look forward to it. So let's go ahead and get started here. Our grammatical basics in the second declension. Grammatical basics, again, broken record here. Greek is a highly inflected language. This means that its forms change on the basis of its grammatical function in a sentence. So a word is going to look different depending on what it is doing in a sentence. So we saw this in the last video with respect to verbs, especially with respect to person and number. That person and number of a Greek verb is indicated by its suffixes. And the same is going to be true with nouns. That a different Greek nouns are going to look different based on what they are doing in a sentence. And this is different from English, wherein English is not a highly inflected language, and the result is that word order is very important for making meaning in English. And we say that in English, word order is inflexible. That is, it is not flexible. So this is the example that Black gives in the grammar. Apostles see people versus people see apostles. We have the same words here, but by changing the word order, they mean different things, that the words have different grammatical functions in the sentence. So the apostles is the subject in this sentence, but it's the object in this sentence. And people is the object in this sentence, but it is the subject in this sentence. In contrast, Greek word order is flexible because Greek is a highly inflected language. So returning to this idea, because it is so important for your understanding of Greek. So we have this same sentence in Greek, and you'll notice that even if you don't know these Greek words yet, you can see that apostoloi and apostolous, this is the same word for apostle. In this case, it is the subject of the sentence. In this case, it is the object of the sentence. So this one roughly correlates to this. This one roughly correlates to this. Apostles see people versus people see apostles. And the way that we know that this is the subject of the sentence is based on the form of the word. And the way that we know that this is the subject is based on the form of the word. The way that we know that this is the object in this sentence is based on its form. And the way that we know that the object here is based on its form. And so take a look at these words. So what I'm saying here is that these both are the subject. These both are the object. See if you can tell what the similarity between these two are and the similarity between these two are that might indicate that they are the subject or the object. If you said it is in the endings of the words, you're correct here. Anthropous, this us ending, tells us that we have the object, and the same over here. Apostolous, apostle is the object because of this us ending, and the subject is oi and oi over here. Some more grammatical basics. So one of the things about learning a foreign language is that oftentimes, especially for those of us who only speak one language or only grew up speaking one language or monolingual, learning a new language helps us learn the grammar and a lot of the sort of technical points and the technical terminology of grammar that we may have forgotten from grade school. So we're going to lay out some of these right here just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when I say that, when I say the word subject, I mean the person or the thing in the sentence, the noun in the sentence that does the action of the verb. In English, the subject normally comes before the verb in a sentence. So Dr. Elder teaches Greek. Teaches is the verb. Dr. Elder is the subject of the verb. He's the one that's doing the action of the verb. The direct object, when we speak of the object or the direct object, that's who receives the action of the verb in a sentence. So in the sentence, Dr. Elder teaches Greek, Greek is the thing being taught. It's the object of the verb teaches. An indirect object is like an object, but sort of one step removed. So we could amend our sentence here to read, Dr. Elder teaches Greek to the students. In this case, the students are the indirect object. And oftentimes in English, we indicate the indirect object with 2 or 4. And we'll see that the Greek case that indicates the indirect object often also gets translated 2 or 4 into English. And so to move from our English grammatical basics to our Greek grammatical basis, because Greek is a highly inflected language, broken record, a word inflects on the basis of its grammatical function in a sentence. So Greek nouns have different inflections or different forms for their case, their gender, and their number. So in different cases, genders, and numbers, words are going to look different. And so what we're going to look at here is what these words mean: case, gender, and number. A case is what determines the noun's grammatical function in a sentence. So rather than depending on word order to determine grammatical function, Greek depends on case to determine a noun's grammatical function. So there are 4, actually we're going to add a 5th one here. We're going to add in our vocative as well, the case of command. There are 5 different cases in Greek. The vocative is the least used, and that's why it's not included here, but I think it's important for you to know. 4 different cases: the nominative, which is normally the subject of the sentence; the genitive, which shows possession in most cases; and the dative, which is the indirect object, often translated 2 or 4; and the accusative, which is the direct object in Greek. And so what I want you to do here is to determine in our sample sentence, Dr. Elder teaches the basics of Greek to the students. We have one of each of these, or what would be in Greek a nominative, a genitive, a dative, and an accusative. So I want you to pause the lecture here and see if you can map on to this sample sentence which words correlate to the different Greek cases. So what you should find is it looks something like this. Dr. Elder in the nominative, the subject of the sentence, the subject of the verb teaches. And what Dr. Elder teaches, the basics, is the object in the accusative case of Greek. Of Greek is modifying the accusative basics to the students, which is the indirect object, which would be in the dative case in Greek. So the other thing we need to note besides case at this point is that Greek nouns have one of 3 grammatical genders. Those genders are masculine, feminine, and neuter. And note that these are not biological or gender as we would think of gender, but they simply refer to the grammar of a sentence. And so at this point, it's important to sort of note that we have different genders, and this is going to be more important later on when we come to things like adjectives and participles, because words are going to match up with other words in a sentence based on their grammatical gender. But gender does not change the function of a word in a sentence, whereas case does change the function of a word in the sentence. So it's not as though the feminine is going to be the subject and the masculine is going to be the object. This more refers to the form of the noun in a Greek sentence and how the noun is going to look and what patterns of what we would call declension it is going to follow. And the number, of course, refers to either singular or plural. So declension, as I just mentioned, what a declension is a pattern of how nouns change on the basis of their case and number. The word declension literally means sort of a falling, that nouns fall according to a certain pattern based on their case and number in the different declensions. And Greek has 3 different declensions: first, second, and third. This week we are only addressing the second declension. Later on we will get to the first declension, and then even later on we will get to the third declension in this class. So the second declension is a group or a pattern of nouns that end in either omicron sigma in the nominative singular, words like logos, that are usually masculine, though not always the case. So usually nouns that end in omicron sigma in the nominative singular are masculine and they decline according to the second declension, or they change their form of case according to the second declension. So that's one of the groups of nouns in the second declension. The other group of nouns in the second declension is nouns that end in omicron nu in the nominative singular and are usually neuter as to their gender. So they're going to follow this pattern of changing their form. So you can see here these different patterns that look very, very similar to one another. And what I'm going to do on this large paradigm here is call attention to the places where there are differences between the words anthropos and doron. So this is going to be a neuter singular word that ends in on. So it's a second declension neuter. And this is going to be a second declension masculine that ends in os. And the major differences between the second declension in the masculine and in the neuter comes in the nominative. So you see the on here, the nominative and the accusative, and then the nominative and the accusative in the plural as well. So in the singular and in the plural. And so the thing to note is that these are, the neuter is usually going to be different from the masculine in the nominative and in the accusative and also in the vocative, but they are going to match one another. So the nominative, the accusative, and the vocative in the neuter are always exactly the same to one another. So you can count on these always looking like this, on, ah. And the same thing over here. These are always going to be the same for second declension nouns, but they don't look identical to one another. So whereas we have oi and us in the masculine of the second declension nominative and accusative respectively, over here we have alpha and alpha in both the nominative and the accusative. So that's one sort of helpful hint when memorizing this paradigm. I'm going to give you another helpful hint here in just a second for memorizing this paradigm. But now I want to give you two things that you are likely going to forget, and that's okay. But I want to make sure I mention them so that they're sort of in your brain, so that when you come across them and when we talk about them later, you can think, oh yeah, I do remember having learned that even though I forgot it. So one thing is that neuter plural subjects take singular verbs. So a word like Dora, we would expect it to have a plural verb. That if it were the subject of some verb, that verb would be in the plural because the noun is in the plural. But neuter plurals make an exception to that and have their verb in the singular rather than in the plural. And then the other one is that second declension nouns are normally masculine and neuter, but some feminine nouns are also of the second declension pattern. So you'll see some nouns follow this pattern that are not actually masculine or neuter, but they are feminine. And that's going to be more important when we come to first and third declension nouns later on in the semester. But once again, calling it to your attention now so that when we come to it, you can think, oh yes, I remembered that, and it will have been repeated information for you. So our forms of the second declension to take that large paradigm that contains both the endings and the endings put onto a word and to sort of try and boil it down to just the endings and to make it more memorable. So here I have made all of our endings for the masculine of the second declension into red. And I'm not able to make a Yoda subscript, that small Yoda under the omega red in my font. So I've just colored it in there. And I want to introduce you to someone who helps me remember the forms of the second declension. His name is Swain Ionisus. You can tell that he is really, really suave just by his name, Swain Ionisus. And his name, of course, refers to the different letters of the second declension endings here as they are added on to the different vowels. And so here he is, Swain Ionisus. he helps me remember that the second declension, that these are the letters of the second declension. So this is sort of my mnemonic for getting you to remember these things. And then if you can remember, along with swain, ionisus, if you can remember that the nominative, the accusative, the vocative of the neuter are going to differ from the masculine, all you have to do is remember these differences that go along with our suave friend swain, ionisus. And so what I want to do is sort of give you some scaffolded practice of writing the endings of the second declension using our friend swain, ionisus. So the way that we're going to do this is I have taken away now the endings of the second declension. I want you to pause the lecture and go ahead and on your whiteboard, make a chart that looks like this. It's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll give it a fifth one for the vocative as well. A chart with 5 spaces up here, and then a chart with 4 spaces here. And go ahead and see if you can fill in your endings for the second declension in the masculine on this side, the singular up here, the plural down here, and then the neuter over here on this side, knowing about our friend swain, ionisus. So here are the actual endings. Go ahead and self-correct yourself. See how you did on this and make any corrections that you made a mistake on here. So pause the lecture and go ahead and do that. And the next thing we're going to do is take away swain, ionisus's name and try again. So one more time, make your charts and write down the endings for the second declension of the masculine and the neuter. So once again, it should look like this. Go ahead and do some self-correction by pausing. And the last time we're going to do this, we're going to do it without our image of our friend. So see if you can fill in the blanks without the image of our suave friend. And once more, here are the endings of the second declension in the masculine and in the neuter. And the last thing we're going to do here, I've given us 3 sample translations. I'm going to show you sort of a way to go about translating and sort of the way that I recommend that you go about translating sentences and clauses from Greek into English. Our tendency is to want to start simply with the left side and move to the right, because for us in English, word order is so important. And that's a good way to sort of go to get started about doing things, to kind of go word by word and try and figure out what's going on in the sentence. But beyond that, what we want to do is find the different elements of the sentence, because those different elements of the sentence are going to be more critical for making meaning than is the order. So remember that the order of the words is not necessarily going to tell you what the subject is and what the object is. So I suggest that you follow this pattern in order to translate the sentence up here. And then over here, I have given you sort of different helps. Parsing helps for the present active indicative endings, and then the different case endings in the second declension, as well as the vocabulary here. So go ahead and pause the lecture and go see if you can write down a translation of this Greek sentence here. And so then when I give us the information here, what we have is when we find the verb, we actually find that the very first word in the clause is the verb. That is often the case in Greek. It's going to be a present active indicative, third person singular. So we're looking for a he, she, or an it as the subject of our verb, the one doing the action, and we find it in the very next word. So because we're looking for the subject, we're looking for the nominative, the word in the nominative. In this case, it's adelphos, a nominative masculine singular word that means brother. So a brother speaks, And then we're going to want to look for an object, something in the accusative case. We get that with logon. It's an accusative masculine singular from the nominative logos, meaning a word. So a brother speaks a word. And then we find here another word in the dative, which is going to be an indirect object, to a person. So to put it all together, a brother, putting it back into English as we would put it into English word order, a brother speaks a word to a person. Let's do the same thing here with an even simpler sentence, just 2 words. And notice, because Greek is a highly inflected language, it can have an entire sentence that is just 2 words or even just 1 word. So we could actually remove this word, and this could be a sentence in and of itself. So go ahead and on your whiteboards, see if you can give us a translation of this simple sentence. So this is, so when I mark the parts of the sentence, this is going to be our verb, pherusin. It's a present active indicative, 3rd person plural from pharaoh, meaning they bring or they carry. And the next thing we're going to do is look for the subject of this verb. And we have a candidate in Dora. So Dora could be, when we look over here to our second declension endings, we see that Dora could be a nominative plural, matching this here, but it can also be an accusative plural. So if this were the subject of the sentence, if Dora were in the nominative, it would be the gifts are bringing. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's probably the case that the gifts are actually the object, that they are in the accusative case, not in the nominative case, and that the subject of the verb is actually embedded in the ending here, that the they is a non-explicit subject. It's what we would call an implicit subject. So they are bringing gifts. And I should note here that the difference between the accusative and the nominative, there's no way besides the context of the sentence and how it makes sense to know whether this is the accusative or the nominative. So the only way we know this is by the context of the sentence at large and making sense of it. And let's do one more. Pause the lecture and see if you can translate this brief sentence. Luusin huioi doulos apostolon. And so my marking of this sentence is going to look like this. When I look for the verb, once again, we find it as the very first word in this sentence, luusin. And it's going to be a present active indicative, 3rd person plural. We get that information from over here about the 3rd person plural with our ending. And so now we're going to look for a subject, a they that is doing the releasing or the loosening, and we get a plural subject with huioi, which is a nominative masculine plural. We get that information from over here, this oi ending. So the sons, or just sons, there's no definite article here. We'll talk more about the definite article later on. Sons release or are releasing, and then we're looking for what they are releasing. We're looking for an object of the releasing in the accusative case. We get that with doulos. These sons are releasing doulos, but then we have this other word, apostolon. We see that this own ending is indicative of the genitive plural. So they're releasing servants of apostles. So apostles is modifying doulos, saying who the servants belong to. And notice here that I have circled this entire grouping of words here. So whenever I am marking a sentence, I circle the object of the sentence. And because apostolon is modifying this object, I've encircled the entire thing insofar as the whole phrase, the whole accusative phrase here is the object of the sentence. All right, well done. We have now introduced verbs, we've introduced some nouns, and now we are able to translate some sentences together. So I'm going to let you loose to go ahead and translate sentences off on your own for the homework for this week. I'm going to be asking you some parsing information about those sentences, and I will see you as we come together either in a synchronous meeting or if you watch the answer videos for the homework assignments. I will see you in one of those two different places.